Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reality Bites, the show where we talk about all the greatest hits reality TV shows have to offer. I'm your host, Jake Schaff. Let's get started. Oh, man, this episode was really something. You may have heard it in the last week's episode. It wasn't a huge episode. Not a lot was happening. It was a short episode that I ended up publishing, and not to mention I was pretty salty about Ethan going home, and I still am, not gonna lie, but this episode had a lot of very surprising moments, a lot of impactful moments. The elimination was kind of expected, but this was probably one of my favorite episodes, probably my favorite episode they've done so far this season. And there is a lot to unpack, a lot to address. So I'm not going to waste any time. Let's just jump right into episode 4, I Like Revenge. Very fitting title. And let's jump into it. So first we have to talk about Sele coming back from tribal council, and Adam's basically just, as he said it himself, he knew he screwed up by trying to play both sides and trying to make sure that everybody was satisfied with the move he was going to make. If he just left the move alone, Parvati probably would have gone home that night. Ethan would have still been around, and nobody would have been mad at him. But Adam's really dug himself into a hole. So of course he knows he screwed up. He knows he has a lot of people to try and rebuild trust with. So we see him talking with everybody, with Ben, with Denise, with all the people he has wronged, which is basically just about everyone on the tribe. And I'll be honest, I know what I've said it a couple times how much I'm a big fan of Adam, but at this point, I wouldn't be too upset if he went home, because I'm just not thrilled with the game he's playing. I think he's getting a little too, like I said with multiple people, he's getting too starstruck by being around these giant game players, and he needs to try to get himself back into game mode and play this game like he played it the first time, if not better. Probably better, because his game, even the first time, wasn't that perfect. But the only people who benefit from Adam's missteps, of course, are Rob and Parvati. Even though they did lose one of their allies, they still see a big crack in that alliance and a big weak point that they can utilize by trying to throw Adam under the bus. And after all the times that they've been knocked down, especially Rob, I really wanted Rob to have some sort of a win this episode, because he just kept getting beaten these last couple episodes, with Amber going home, and then Rob costing his tribe 2 immunity challenges, and then Ethan going home. Like, the dude needs a win. So I was really hoping that he would get that this episode, be it he turns things around and gets on the right side of the vote, or he manages to win the immunity challenges. And thankfully, one of those things did in fact happen. And then one more quick thing before we go back to talking about Adam. Just one tiny thing I noticed in the episode. We saw Rob talking with Michele, playing that little hook, that weird like hook game that seems like Survivor's version of a ball in a cup, or tossing the ring onto a stick. I don't know what you want to call it. I keep seeing that every episode. But Michele was talking to Rob about the backlash she got for when she won Survivor Co-Wrong. And I'm going to be totally honest, that's not really something I've thought about a whole lot, with Survivor winners getting backlash for the games they played. You'd think it'd be something I'd think of more often, but I thought, why would they get affected by this? They won the game, they have the money, they can move on. But she was commenting on the fact how a lot of people felt that she didn't deserve to win the game. And honestly, at the time she won, I too was disappointed with her winning. I felt that Aubrey deserved the win. I also felt Ty somewhat deserved the win over Michele, because I felt that for the majority of the game, Michele just completely coasted. She was getting a very big purple edit, I thought. I was close to calling her Purple Michele a few times. But over time, I've come to appreciate the game she's played, and I've come to appreciate how she managed to clinch victory. She made a lot of big moves towards the end. She has a very strong social game. And that's the thing about Survivor. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad winner. I would have loved to see any person who's ever won Survivor come back onto the season because, like them or not, they each did something right. And that's something everybody has to admit. But I guess that is something that I need to consider, that just because you won Survivor doesn't mean that everyone is going to love you or love the fact that you won. So that was interesting. Anyway, back to Adam. The next day at camp, we see him really trying hard to paint himself in a good light again. We see him helping out around camp a lot more than a person normally would. He's getting a lot of water. He's chopping a lot of firewood. He's finding food in the forest, trying to make himself useful and trying to let everything blow over and get the target off his back. Which honestly, trying to make yourself useful around camp, I mean, I can understand why you'd think that's a good idea, and it is, but try not to make it too obvious. Just the smartest thing you could do after something like that happens is just try to not really stand out. Like, don't do too little, don't do too much, just do the right amount. And I think Adam was doing just a little too much that it's really started to become noticeable. But regardless of that, we see people like Jeremy in the confessional stating that they're willing to forego what Adam did in the past as long as he promises to keep his allegiance to the new school players and not talk to Rob and Parvati. Well, this caused Rob and Parvati to once again try to mastermind the situation and once again prove why they're such incredible players. And they decide that just because Adam isn't doing his moves again and his sketchiness again, that doesn't mean that they can't make it seem like he's still doing it. So of course they talk to Jeremy and Michele, and they're telling them, oh yeah, Adam's already talking to us again. It seems like he hasn't learned anything from last time. And of course Jeremy and Michele are eating it up, not realizing that they're talking to two of Survivor's greatest liars. So that right there told me that if Sele were to lose the challenge of this episode, that chances are Adam was going to be going home, which honestly wouldn't have surprised me if you told me that at the start of the episode. But, of course, that did not end up happening. But we'll get to that later. Let's go over to Dakal a little bit. And honestly, I haven't really needed to talk about Dakal that much because not really that much has happened around camp. The only things we've really seen mostly have to do with comedic bits about Tony, whether he's building a crazy dangerous ladder or he's trying to catch a baby shark. Baby shark. I apologize for doing that. I will never do that again. So they're just chilling. They're not really too focused on the game. They're celebrating making it to day 10. One thing that surprised me, though, real quick, was the fact that they could see the edge of extinction from their camp, which I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, because it always will serve as a constant reminder of where you could end up in this game, of how, like in Survivor's terms, what they have is pretty good in terms of luxury. I mean, it's not fantastic, obviously, but it's better than, way better than they have over at the Edge, and how in an instant everything can go away. So I do like that it serves as a constant reminder, but of course you have to imagine the anxiety that it would cause if you were constantly seeing the edge of extinction. I don't know if Sele can see it from their camp. It doesn't seem like it. So I don't know. I feel like this would be more impactful if you could see this from both camps. And maybe you can, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we see Yule talking in confessional and how he continues to state that he and the free agents are still in control. They're still being very confident in their position. And it seems like now that the free agents are starting to become found out. And the first person who figured that out, of course, was Tyson. And Tyson realizes that the bigger players, the ones with more connections, are going to start to become picked off. They already got Amber, and how he realizes he could be next, and then Sandra, then Tony, then Sarah, and then it'll go on. So, of course, we see him talking to all those people saying, listen, the people who don't have connections are the ones we need to worry about. They're going to constantly go after us big threat. And, of course, I think Tyson was totally making the right decision because the free agents are some of the most dangerous players in this game right now. And they're doing exactly what they did the first time that they won Survivor, and that's coasting. And that's not making them seem like too big of a presence. I don't know. And if I were on the camp, if I were on the Dakal tribe, I would totally listen to everything Tyson was telling me and really start to realize what was going on with the free agents. But Sandra wasn't having any of it. I think Sandra still has that mentality she's had every single time she plays Survivor, in that she doesn't care who the target is as long as it isn't her. And Tyson is someone who's been on her radar ever since the start, especially since the recent episode where Tyson stated that Sandra needs to go. Just like Rob, Sandra forgives, but she doesn't forget. And Sandra was really starting to think that Tyson was just trying to stir the pot, and he's trying to get the target on somebody other than himself. He's already on the bottom, thanks to Amber going home, so she thinks that a move like this wouldn't surprise her at all. So that was interesting, and already I was getting the sense that we may be seeing Dakal at Tribal Council that night. Before we get into that, let's talk about the Edge of Extinction, and I have a lot to say about this. I mean, the Edge of Extinction is a twist I've never been a giant fan of. I mean, I'm kind of happy that it's on this season because at least we get to see more of the winners outside of the actual game, and at least they still have a presence on the season. And I really like what they're doing with these mini challenges. They're making it they're giving everybody something to do, and I think the task that they gave them this episode is probably the most important task they've ever given on the Edge, and probably one of the most important ones they will ever give to anyone on the Edge. First of all, this actually finally proved something that I was hoping would be true for very long, in that more fire tokens would come into play later on outside of the 20 that were given out on day one. So that's really, really good to hear, in that there's more of an opportunity for these advantages to be bought, which none of them have been bought yet. But I have a feeling, though, that's going to change very, very soon. So more fire tokens are coming into play, and the note said that each of the 4 players on the Edge, Natalie, Amber, Danny, and Ethan, would have the opportunity to earn 1 fire token if they just brought 20 pieces of firewood from the top of the Edge all the way back down to camp. The only catch is they have to carry them 1 at a time. And when you can, which I think if this were an ordinary task in real life, back home, when you've been well fed and well rested, like, it'd seem a little unnecessary, and sure, it'd be tiring to do it 20 times, but it seemed pretty doable. But when you take into consideration the fact that it's a really steep climb, you've had very little food, very little sleep, very few calories to burn, this task almost seemed impossible, and I would have been very surprised if anyone actually pulled it off. And this wasn't for the first person to get it done, it was for whoever could get it done, so everyone could win this. And already, from just one trip, everyone was exhausted, and I was really already starting to feel like, yeah, this ain't gonna happen. The only person who really didn't have an issue with this, at least it didn't seem like she had that much of an issue with it, was Natalie. She was just powering through. She seemed to really be leading in this. And I looked it up. She is, at least she was at one point, she was a CrossFit coach and a physical therapy student. So I would say she's definitely probably the most physically fit out of the 4 people on the Edge of Extinction. So I guess that would make sense on paper. If anyone were to succeed in this challenge, the best chance would probably go to Natalie. And this just proves to me how underestimated I really think she is. She's continued to surprise me. She's she won the past two advantages on the edge. And I think if she keeps up these strong performances, we really could see her coming back into the game in a few episodes or whenever somebody does come back into the game. So Natalie manages to get all 20 pieces of firewood, and even though it's grueling and tiresome for Amber and Danny, they too manage to get it done. The other person we really see struggling with this more than anyone was Ethan. And Ethan was another person who I thought, if someone were to be able to get it done, I thought Ethan had a pretty good chance. But Ethan was really concerning me towards the start of this. We just gradually see him get more and more tired, and he ends up having a fainting spell. And when medical's checking him out, and he was fine, he wasn't in any danger of leaving, but when medical's checking him out and saying that he really needs to take it easy, I felt his pain. I felt his defeat. He said he had only had like maybe 4 pieces of wood left. And especially after seeing Ethan go home, when I know how much the show means to him and I know how much he wants to prove to everyone that he can still do this after beating cancer twice, you really wanted him to get this done. So after resting, Ethan knows he has to finish this. He's come this far, and you don't give up. And he powers through. He grabs 19 pieces of wood, and then for the last one, Natalie, Amber, and Danny, all of whom have already finished collecting their wood, all of them are already tired, they all go with Ethan to grab that last piece of wood. And I think that is one of the most powerful moments we have had on Survivor in recent history. I mean, yes, this is a game. I know that everyone is tired and I know this is somebody else getting a power in this game, but it's all about support. And I think even in a normal season, you don't know these people for very long. You don't know their stories. You don't know enough about them to really form a connection, but you do because of what you're going through in that moment of being hungry, being tired. And that's one of those things that still makes Survivor so relevant today. So watching everyone support Ethan and grab that last piece of wood was huge. And it was really inspiring for everyone to see. And I think not only is this one of the most important challenges that I think Survivor has done recently, this is probably one of those moments that I hope will be remembered many years down the line as why this show is so incredible and what this challenge represents. And this also helps people realize the true potential of the Edge of Extinction, which is that even if you don't return to the game, you can still gain so much from this experience. Like, even last time with people like Reem or Aubrey and all the people who were sent home very, very early from that season, the fact that you lasted that long on the edge with a much harder environment than you get playing the actual Survivor is incredible. And it's really starting to help me come around to the Edge of Extinction. I'd still prefer it if somebody who was sent home on day 9 doesn't come back into the game on day 36, but other than that, I think what they're doing is very, very exceptional. And I think they're stepping it up from the last time the Edge of Extinction was used. So anyway, let's get back into the actual game. Let's go to the actual immunity challenge. It's another fierce one. It's another swimming challenge and another puzzle challenge. And after Sele blew it twice in a row with the puzzles, you can tell they really wanted to bring this one home. And I really wanted Sele to win this too for multiple reasons. I wanted Rob to finally get his morale back up and take home a win because I knew how much he wanted one. And also because I wanted to see Dakal play this game. They've been coasting for way too long. Things have been, as I think somebody said it, I think it was Tyson who said kumbaya. It's been kumbaya way too much at Dakal, and I wanted there to be a big shakeup. So Jeff explains the challenge, Dakal has to sit out 2 people, and Sandra decides to sit out. And already and before anyone even said anything, I already was noticing the fact that Sandra had sat out for Dakal in every single immunity challenge that they've had to sit people out. And in case people are wondering, well, why is that being allowed? Isn't it, if in back-to-back challenges people can't sit out multiple times? Well, that's if they're in the same episode. If there's a tribal council separating challenges, then everything gets reset. So there's not really a rule against Sandra sitting out so many times, but it's still not something I'm a huge fan of. And thankfully, Parvati called her out on it, calling it the Sandra sit-out bench. And I really want Sandra to start pulling her weight. She said she was going to pull her weight at camp. I want to see her pull her weight in challenges. I know she's not going to be the strongest person out there, but I mean, doing something is better than just doing nothing. Like, I'm sure if I were on Survivor, yeah, there'd be challenges I wouldn't want to do, but I wouldn't sit out every single one. You gotta check. You gotta check and make sure which ones you want to do, and make sure that you're giving it your all. But anyway, Sandra sits out, and Tony sits out too, which was surprising because he's one of Dakal's bigger players. But anyway, the challenge starts, and already from the start, I was already getting bad feelings for Sele once again. It didn't help the fact that the 3 people who had to jump and collect the keys were probably 3 of the shorter players on the tribe: Parvati, Denise, and Adam. And they couldn't swap anyone out, so they're pretty much stuck with this. So that was a huge blunder on their part. And even with Dakal missing a couple times, they still had gotten a huge lead going into the puzzle. But then Survivor was starting to do that thing again that I've noticed them do a few times, when either someone or a tribe is messing up multiple times. Jeff sort of does that thing where he's trying to give a lot of inspiration to one specific player to do one specific task. We've seen it with Suri in Game Changers trying to cross the balance beam. We've seen it in Ghost Island with Donathan trying to unlock that cage to get the buoys. It's happened before, and he was doing it again with Adam, who was really struggling to grab that 3rd key. Which, first of all, I think a move that nobody used was maybe trying to run on the balance beam and jump and grab the key. Everyone was just standing there and jumping from a pretty small distance. But Pro's pep talk managed to pull through for Adam, and he got the key. And then it was starting to seem like, the way the edit was starting to go, I was getting the sense that this challenge wasn't over yet, and that Sele was about to make a pretty big comeback. And they've made a comeback in episode 1, I'm sorry, with challenge 2, coming from behind and winning that immunity challenge. And this one was an even bigger comeback, and probably one of the biggest comebacks I've seen in recent history on Survivor. But Sele finally broke their losing streak and finally won a challenge. And they also won a bunch of chickens, which I had completely forgotten that they had won until just this moment. But Sele was finally safe. They could finally relax. And Dakal's kumbaya was finally over, and they were headed to Tribal Council. So back at camp, it seemed like 2 big names were being brought up for elimination. Tyson was already going around trying to continue his ploy to target the free agent players, and he was throwing Nick's name out there because Nick was the weakest link of the 4 players, and also because Nick was one of the people on the puzzle portion of the challenge for Dakal, and he was very liable for the loss. And as Tyson said it himself, things just seemed way too easy. Which, of course, on Survivor, if things are way too easy, chances are it's not going to happen. So the free agents were trying to throw Tyson's name out there, and already a lot of people were interested because of how big of a threat Tyson has been in the past. He's played this game 4 times. He knows what he's doing, played a very dominant game in Blood versus Water. He was someone that a lot of people wanted to see go home. Also because of fear of, if there was a merge, he would jump back over to the Sele tribe and possibly team up with Rob. Once again, bringing that all-important poker alliance back into play for Survivor when it's been pretty stagnant conversation for quite a while. Like, I'd completely forgotten about the poker alliance. But Tyson wasn't giving up, and he was continuing to try and maintain the free agent ploy to multiple people, and also trying to convince people like Tony and Sarah that if he sticks around, he's a shield for them, and that their targets won't be as big. And it seemed like this was working, and it all ultimately boiled down to Sandra, who was in the middle. Either she goes with the seasoned players, or she goes with the free agents. And I knew Sandra, she had that big grudge against Tyson, and I knew there would be a good chance of her just deciding to be evil and send him home. I mean, Sandra was not responsible for Tyson leaving in Heroes vs. Villains. I think I thought she was at first, but she really wasn't. Parvati was. But with how much Tyson's brought up her name, I knew Sandra would easily jump at the chance to get rid of him. And I've also really started to realize that Sandra's name has not been brought up, like, at all. Same with Rob, and it's really surprising how these two big players have managed to skate by really unscathed without a single vote cast against either of them. But Sandra is more surprising because at least Rob helps out around camp. He's very physical and he pulls through in challenges. But Sandra, I mean, if she sits out so many challenges for Dakal, I think she's someone that they can afford to lose. Also, I was totally reminded this episode the fact that she had an idol gifted to her from Natalie that she has to use next time she goes to elimination, or else it's completely dead and not important anymore. I'm also not sure how long she's going to be able to skate by in this game without being detected, because I really don't see her winning another $2 million in the future. So heading into Tribal Council, it seemed like the big target was still on either Nick or Tyson. But the big topic of conversation everyone was discussing was the idea of idol worshipping. Not immunity idols, but personal idols. You see, like, the newer players talking about how when they get into this game, they're so starstruck to be playing against these legends of Survivor. You see Nick talking about how he really respects Tyson and how he had a crush on Parvati in high school. And everyone is trying to separate their personal views of these players with their strategic views of these players. And then there's also the topic of you would love the opportunity to vote your idol out of the game. That really shows how good of a player you are. And while that is impressive, you also have to consider the repercussions of a move like that. It's like I was saying a couple episodes ago. If you vote out Boston Rob, everyone will know that you voted out Boston Rob. And therefore, that puts a target on your back. It's all about getting rid of these big players at the right time. If you're able to build a strong foundation and you have a good support system, then is the time to strike against a giant player. But if you just manage to get rid of a big player when you yourself don't have a lot of allies to rely on, that could be an issue, and that could be the death of you in this game. So, the votes come in, and ultimately it seems like not even Tony or Sarah have decided to stick with Tyson. They decided to go for the easy vote and get rid of the bigger threat in the game, and Tyson was sent home from the competition and sent to the edge of extinction. Which, I don't think that was the smart decision. I know that next episode they're going to have a team switch, but I didn't know that at the time. I thought if they want to be successful, they would probably be smarter to get rid of the weaker player in Nick, and also that'd be a giant hit against the free agents, and I kind of wanted them to suffer a bit of a loss, even though I like those guys. But even though Yul and Sophie are probably my two winner picks right now, there's one thing that they didn't really experience the first time they played that I kind of wanted them to experience now. And that is that the first time they played, almost everything seemed to go their way. there was never really a time when they were in the minority or they didn't really have a ton of control. They relied, again, they had strong support systems, and they managed to completely dominate their games. I wanted them to have those, just even if they were really tiny, I wanted them to have those bumps in the road instead of just a smooth ride to the finish. I mean, again, with this team switch, I think that will really shake things up because it'll separate the free agent alliance and really leave all of them scrambling. So, one last thing before we get into that is that Tyson decided to give his fire token over to Nick. And I believe he did it as a show of respect, as a way of saying, you know what? You guys helped get me out. You deserve this token. Even though Nick was the only person who didn't vote for Tyson, but even though he was in on the plan, Nick decided to throw away his vote to Kim, which I was surprised to see. That came out of nowhere, but he did it just on the off chance Tyson had the idol, which I can understand. So that just about does it for this episode of Survivor. Like I said, next time we're finally getting a team switch. As for how the tribes will be divided, I don't know if it's going to be 2 tribes or 3 tribes. My gut's telling me 3, only because there's 15 players left, and if you do 3 tribes, then everyone gets split up 5-5-5. That's what I'm guessing. And this last part of the episode really surprised me. Apparently, Michele is playing this game, and she's going to be put on a tribe with her ex-boyfriend. And I didn't know Michele dated a former winner on Survivor. So, of course, after I see this, I have to go into research mode, and I have to go look to find out who she dated and what their history is or was. And the fact that she said she was now on a tribe with her ex-boyfriend already narrowed it down to 4 people. I knew Tony was married, and I knew Yul was married, and also hasn't been in the scene for a very long time. So that immediately narrowed it down to Nick and Wendell. And for some reason, I was really thinking it was Nick. But then as I delved into the internet, it turns out no. Michele and Wendell actually previously dated. I don't know when they dated, and I also don't know how long they dated. But it was a serious relationship, and I think things are on amicable terms. I don't know. I really don't know that much about the relationship. Again, I just found this out maybe an hour ago, but that's really going to be interesting. And also another tiny little tidbit of information that I learned recently. Apparently, Amber and Ethan also used to date. Didn't know that. And the only reason I found out about that one was because I saw somebody like tweet something on Twitter. They're saying, oh, Rob has look on his face, and he realizes now that his wife is now going to be alone on the edge with her ex. But I looked it up. It seems like Amber and Ethan did date for a short time. They even went to the Survivor Marquesa reunion together, which was Rob's first season. So that's very interesting. But, of course, I don't know much about that relationship either. So that's it for the dating game. I mean, Survivor. Really great episode. Really looking forward to how everything shakes up next week. Keeping my fingers crossed that Rob and Sandra end up on the same tribe somehow. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm really hoping to see that. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next time. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you let me know what you thought of this episode. And as always, check out my other channel, 239MI, where I create a show called Abandoned about Pokemon competing on a reality show. It's really fun, and it's a lot of cool elements, and something I'm really happy to bring onto YouTube. Anyway, that's it. I'll see you guys next time. This is Jake signing out.